Wow, looks different from this perspective. My name is Anthony Bartolacci, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Sensor Tower. Before I get going, and unfortunately it will be in English, my Portuguese is only so-so, but I do want to thank the incredible AppsFlyer team for putting on a tremendous event. This is actually my second MAMA of the year. I was at the MAMA San Francisco event in January, which was awesome, but everyone kept saying, you have to come to Brazil. That's really our best event. And I hate to tell San Francisco, but everybody was right. This really is a spectacular event today. I am here. Let's go back a slide. I am here to talk about the state of the mobile app ecosystem, looking at trends that we're seeing in the marketplace for 2025 and beyond. And all of this data is brought by Sensor Tower. For those of you who may not be familiar with Sensor Tower, we are a leading provider of data across the entire digital economy. So you can sort of see up on the screen, here are the different channels that we cover, and we provide competitive intelligence, strategic intelligence, and actionable insights across all of these domains. The one that you may be most familiar with is mobile app insights. Obviously, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Sensor Tower actually acquired a company called Data AI, or App Annie, in 2024. So if any of you are familiar with Data AI or App Annie, they are now all under the Sensor Tower umbrella. We have PC console data, we have audience data, website insights. The other thing I just wanted to quickly call out is we do have a very competitive solution on digital advertising, where Sensor Tower measures advertising creatives, spend, and impression on top social networks, OTT, and desktop, web, and video. And because we're in Brazil, I just wanted to flag that in Brazil, we currently cover Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, but this quarter we're also launching YouTube, Reddit, LinkedIn, X, so we should have full coverage of creatives in Brazil. So we'll move past the salesy part, but Mateus would be mad if I didn't bring that up. So let's move into insights. And where we're going to kick things off is just sort of an overview of where things stand exiting 2024 and into early 2025. So here are sort of the headline statistics on the mobile app ecosystem. And there's a couple that I really want to draw your attention to. First, in 2024, in-app purchases on Apple and Google devices globally surpassed the $150 billion mark, which is a huge accomplishment and obviously cements the digital marketplace as somewhere everybody needs to be and participate in. The other stats here that I think are kind of eye-popping, in 2024, consumers spent 4.2 trillion hours on mobile apps. That is just an absurd amount, but it also rings true. It's about 3.5 hours per day per person, which actually seems low. I think I was on my mobile apps for 3 hours in the Uber from the airport to the venue today. And you can sort of see people are also using a wide array of apps, 26 apps per month on average, and fulfilling multiple services, entertainment, banking, retail, you name it, there's usually an app that does it. I want to sort of drill down a little bit more on that in-app purchase part. I'm going to be highlighting a couple macro trends, and then we're going to transition into some local Brazil takes from Sensor Tower data. But first, let's look at that $150 billion in global spend on in-app purchases. So what's really interesting about this chart is that for the first maybe decade of the existence of the app stores, games were the driving force of purchases on Apple and Google. They were the innovators in terms of monetization mechanics, getting people comfortable making transactions directly on their device. And even as recently as like 5 or 6 years ago, the amount of money on games versus the rest of the app universe was like 3 to 1. But you can also see on this chart with sort of that blue teal line representing non-gaming apps, that segment of the market has really exploded. And again, I think so many of you probably know why. I mean, so entertainment, dating, streaming, cloud services, AI, so many of them are pushing to in-app subscription models where monthly you're getting billed. So the innovation is starting to catch up on the non-gaming side. And you can see that by 24% growth last year versus only 3 or 4% on the gaming side. And what's really interesting about this point in time, we're sort of looking at how things stand in the middle of 2025, is that we think by the end of the year, revenue from non-gaming apps will for the first time surpass that of gaming apps. That's not to sort of say gaming is not still a crucial part of the app ecosystem, but it is showing the catch-up that's being played by these other categories. One other sort of macro trend I wanted to call out is that in 2024, for the first time, we actually saw a pullback in some developed countries in terms of total hours spent on social media. And this is something that we're sort of calling digital fatigue or social media fatigue. It could also just be saturation, just tons of competition for consumer engagement. Not to make too much of it, because I think people are still spending 60 to 90 minutes a day on some of the most popular social networks and services. But in developed countries like the US, like Brazil, we actually did see a little bit of a pullback in that total hours. Now, globally, total time spent on all of these social networks and short-form video platforms did go up. So the gains are still happening internationally. But in markets where TikTok and Snapchat and Meta's properties have been around for 10 plus years, we are wondering if they're starting to reach the top of the mountain. Now, the question is, where's consumer attention going? And that sort of leads me to talking about AI on mobile. So one category that we called out as being a huge gainer in 2024 was AI chatbots. I'm sure many of you use them for both personal, professional reasons. And globally, that was a category that was on fire in 2024 and is not showing any signs of slowing down in 2025. Just even looking at Brazil, in 2024, there were 40 million plus installations of chatbot apps, and more than half of them were ChatGPT. And even looking at Sensor Tower data for April of 2025, the monthly active users on ChatGPT are still 8 to 10 times more than other popular AI chatbot services. So ChatGPT definitely out there with a big lead in a lot of key markets. This chart, which is probably confusing and challenging to see for people in the audience, but I'm sure we'll share the slides afterwards. I think what's important to highlight is the number of apps that are marketing using AI. So this is not just chatbots. These are apps in all sorts of different categories across the App Store. But it shows how imperative it is not only to embrace AI when putting together an app, but also everybody wants to market that they're using AI. So now we're seeing AI in the descriptions, in the text for apps in all different categories. So segueing into some Brazil-specific trends from our state of mobile, I wanted to highlight the fintech or the finance category. So just from a macro perspective, the fintech market in Brazil is over-indexed in terms of apps versus some other countries. Just even looking at the US as a comparison to Brazil, in the US, only about 4% of total downloads come from the finance category, where in Brazil, that number is 6 to 7%. So it really is sort of a bigger and more important category here. In 2024, we saw continued growth in Brazil, even with so many well-penetrated apps across retail banking or crypto or digital wallets, buy now, pay later, so many different types of services that are available via the app. But I wanted to also talk about a couple that performed exceedingly well in 2024. So first, Nubank being the most downloaded app in 2024 continues with recent trends, but also highlighting a couple of these. I wanted to call out Banco Ito, which is really a great use case for the power of advertising drawing people to an application. So as I mentioned in our digital advertising database, we took a look at this app and it almost doubled its presence on popular social networks in 24. So on Facebook, on Instagram, you were seeing many more advertisements, and it ended up driving 60% growth in downloads year over year. So there really is an amplification effect by having that visibility on these popular social networks. Another one to call out is just Mercado Pago, highlighting the crossover between retail and fintech, where the processing of the payments is now becoming intertwined with the shopping experience. And like we've seen in other categories, a dominant market player being able to leverage additional services by using existing channels and the pre-existing relationship with users to get them to use auxiliary products. Pivoting to another popular channel in Brazil is retail. And the big story, I think, everywhere in retail and e-commerce is the emergence of these giant Chinese e-commerce players. It is driving downloads across the entire world, as you can see what's happening in 23 and 24, as Shein and Temu and some of these other services are becoming more well-known, they are having a pronounced effect on all installs. And the same thing is happening in Brazil if you look at the growth from 23 to 24. One other thing to note, just because I live in the United States and we can't go a day without hearing about tariffs right now. I've never heard the word tariffs so many times as I have in the first 4 months of 2025. But sort of the interplay between our back and forth tariff situation and how it impacts these Chinese e-commerce apps, and then how it actually impacts the very large social networks that generate the majority of their revenue through advertising, is a story that we've been watching and I think has relevance to industry participants everywhere. So what we saw in 2024 is that Temu was actually the largest advertiser in the US on many of our measured channels. So on a lot of the large socials, Temu was like number 2 or number 3, and Shein was up there as well. Now fast forward to the first quarter of 2025, and those two services are dramatically decreasing their advertisements. And the result is that it could negatively affect those large publishers just because you're taking away demand for advertisements, and that's having to be reallocated to other advertisers. So just something to keep an eye on. For the chart that's on the screen, again, this may jive with your experience using retail apps, but the percentage of downloads of retail apps that are coming from domestic players has been steadily decreasing in the US and Brazil over the last handful of years, down about 13 to 14 percentage points. And a big driver of that has, of course, been those Chinese apps. A little more look at just how fierce the advertising battle is. This chart on the right is showing the advertisers that increase their spend the most in the first quarter of 2025 versus the first quarter of 2024. And no surprise, again, Temu number 1, wondering if actually there's a little bit of a strategy shift because of what's going on in the US, where they're going to target other markets. So even though I am sure you've been bombarded with advertisements from a lot of these retailers over the last 12 months, it looks like it's only accelerating. And obviously, if you look at just overall top advertisers, so many of these are retailers and a lot of global competitors, whether it's Amazon, it could be Temu, Mercado Libre, of course, being the domestic player and number 1 in Brazil. One last use case I want to highlight. I know it's getting a little late, so thanks everybody for sticking with me. I think the bar is about to open, but wanted to highlight the streaming sector in Brazil. So what we saw using Sensor Tower data is that 2024 and early 2025 has been a little bit of a bounce back in terms of installs and time spent in the category. There's more players that are entering the market. I think one thing that's been really interesting is with Disney's acquisition of the Star service that has helped propped up the Disney streaming provider. So something that, as these content providers have access to a greater library of content, it's causing consumers to spend more time watching and enjoying content. And just like a quick little use case on a service called DramaBox. I don't know how many of you are familiar with DramaBox. Obviously started in Asia, but is rapidly becoming a more widely used streaming video service in Brazil and in other parts of the world. And you can sort of see here the evolution of the strategy. So by localizing the content, by making the user experience much more accessible for Brazilian consumers, you can see how it's had an impact on the number of downloads of DramaBox that are coming from Brazil. And the last time our team looked, it's now, I think it's number 6 in terms of streaming video, new downloads of the whole cohort. So just by having, being more optimized for the country that it's participating in, having the right language support, these type of details really matter and is probably going to be a blueprint for more foreign entrants coming into this category. That's going to wrap it up for me. I appreciate everybody's attention today. This has been a terrific event, and thank you again.